Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Onshape live session titled Onshape in the Enterprise from Evaluation to Success. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and want to extend a special thanks to three amazing customers for being a part of this panel discussion we have for you today. Our panelists are going to introduce themselves in just a second, but before they do, I want to emphasize that the objective of today's session is to help and enable you to accelerate the introduction of Onshape into your organization. Which is why, as we hear about the Onshape journeys of these customers here today, from their initial evaluation of Onshape to their successful deployment today, I encourage you to drop any questions that may come to mind into our moderated Q&A for my colleague Steve to then pass on to myself and the rest of the panel. I think you'll find that these three customers encompass a wide cross-section, not just of different industries, but also different corporate structure and makeup, as well as at varying levels of maturity in their Onshape journey. I'm pretty sure that everyone in the audience today is going to find something that resonates with their current situation. So as it does, right, as things hit home and questions come to mind, please participate. This session is going to be much better the more interactive everyone is. So I really encourage you, don't be shy, drop those questions into the Q&A and be a part of the conversation. Awesome. So for those who don't know me, my name is Dan Kane, and I manage the pre-sales technical services team here at Onshape. I've been at Onshape since about April of 2020, and since then I have helped many successful customers through their evaluation and technical validation processes to then actual onboarding and deployment of Onshape. So speaking of our customers, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the panel that we have for you today. So first panelist I want to introduce is Brandon Davies. Brandon, if you don't mind telling us a bit about yourself.
Hey, my name is Brandon Davies. I'm a process engineer at Duraline. We make all the telecommunications conduit. So anytime AT&T or Comcast bury stuff on the ground, it usually goes in our pipe. I've been an Onshape tinkerer for about 4 years, but then using it professionally at work for just about a year now.
Thank you, Brandon. Awesome. Next is going to be Romeo. Romeo, can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi there. My name is Romeo Graham. I'm a director of technology with Jabil Packaging Solutions. Jabil Packaging Solutions is part of Jabil Circuit, which is a global contract manufacturing company with over 250,000 employees in Asia and North America and Europe. The packaging solutions part of that business makes closures and sustainable packages for various industries. I've been using Onshape since 2015 or 16, and as my primary CAD since 2017.
Awesome. Thank you, Romeo. And last but not least, Chris. You want to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Whipple. I'm an animatronics engineer for Hasbro Toys, and I've been lucky enough to work for Hasbro for the past 10 years, working on all of the brands that Hasbro is known for around the world, including Transformers, My Little Pony, Furby, Tickle Me Elmo, and some of our other licensed brands like Star Wars and Marvel. It's been a wild ride, but I'm really excited over the past year to have been using Onshape to help accelerate our development process, and I'm really excited to share our story with you today.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in, right? So in speaking with the three of you over the past few months or so, it's clear that your organizations all took slightly different paths to where you are today in your Onshape journey. You're all at slightly different stages, as I mentioned before. But I think as we've discussed, there's some common themes and sort of challenges that you've overcome that I think would be really valuable for our audience to hear about more today. So let's go ahead and start at the very beginning with your initial evaluation and sort of your initial introduction to Onshape. And Brandon, I'm going to come to you first here. So for Duraline, Onshape was actually the first 3D CAD system that was introduced. Can you tell us a bit about how you identified the need for 3D CAD and then also the process you took to eventually decide on Onshape?
Sure. So like I said, I had been tinkering with Onshape, just one of the free hobbyist licenses, and part of my role is to make work instructions. So I started modeling up some of the equipment in Onshape and just would do a screen capture of that. just to have a nice, pretty 3D model. And as those started to spread, other people started asking, hey, how are you getting these pictures? How are you drawing this? And I said, oh, I just use my little 3D modeling Onshape. And then as that went higher up the chain, they started to think, hey, can you use this to actually start designing parts and jigs? And that's when they got me the professional license. And then from there, we've got about 13 plants in the North America. Other engineers, I think, started to get jealous and saying, hey, how can we get on that? So that's when we decided as a group to come together and say, hey, is this 3D modeling something that we need? Everyone agreed that we did. So then we went through our own evaluation process. So we had been using AutoCAD, just 2D stuff for layouts, drawings. So we really, from the ground up, we compared a few 3D modeling programs and chose Onshape, and then just jumped in head first.
In that evaluation process, when you were comparing different 3D CAD systems, what types of things were undergone? Kind of how did you get a bit analytical about which one you wanted to choose?
Sure. So we narrowed it down to 3. Of course, I kept pushing for Onshape. No one had heard of it yet. And we spent about a week on each, where we had some time to trial run it, test drive them. We had about 20 criteria that we kind of came up with. Just reading up my little list. So like user interface, cloud services, help and support, offline use, the learning curve, standard parts, materials libraries, just a bunch of different things. Accessibility and then shareability were 2 big ones also. And after we each, I say we, all the engineers of the different plants, they let us score on our own and submitted everything, and we just totaled everything up, and Onshape came out on top. It was a close race though, but Onshape won.
So broke it out in a few critical areas and kind of let everybody score for themselves among those and then compare it. Interesting.
Yep.
Cool kind of democratic process for the engineers to choose for themselves. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Chris, I know that Hasbro is actually quite early in their Onshape journey, but can you tell us a bit about the initial decision to even start looking at Onshape and the role that you're playing in the continued evaluation process?
Sure thing. Yeah, so it all started with a cold email through LinkedIn from somebody at Onshape, thinking that Hasbro might be an interesting use case for the software. And I had already been primed. I had seen Onshape on some intern and co-op resumes, so I knew that it was a CAD software, and I knew that there was kind of, a groundswell in the hobbyist community, or at least that was my assumption, was the hobbyist community. And after receiving the LinkedIn message, I was like, oh, I guess they must have an enterprise solution too, and that's what allowed me to dig a little bit deeper, find out all these really amazing tools that Onshape offers and features that Onshape offers. And the one that really stuck out to me personally was the comparison to Git in the software world. That was what really captured my attention. For anybody listening at home that doesn't know what Git is a tool that software engineers can use to basically revision track is probably the best way to put it. And you can, merge and branch and do all these really great things to help streamline the software development process. And Onshape has a lot of similarities to that. And with a robotics background, I do have some CAD and software in my schooling from years past. So I recognized that immediately, and I was like, wow, I can add that functionality to my CAD work. Like, sign me up. I've been using SolidWorks at Hasbro for years, and it was ready. It was time and ready to reevaluate that. So that was what initially got me excited to try out the program professionally at Hasbro.
And so you're sort of digging into that and finding some potential area of value for the company. You were then brought it to parts of the other organization, and other people were also willing to start evaluating it?
Yes, that's correct. So we are just at the end of our first year using it within Hasbro. We have 4 users at the moment, just kind of trying it out, just making sure that it fits within our workflows. And I've been kind of spearheading that. And it's interesting that it's coming from me as a user as opposed to a manager. So it's really a grassroots effort.
Not that different from Brandon as well.
Exactly,
very cool.
Yeah.
And then Romeo, you had a somewhat unique situation where you've actually introduced Onshape to multiple organizations, right? Ecologic originally, and then now Jabil through acquisition. Anything you'd add to the experiences that Chris and Brandon showed that you think the audience would benefit from?
Well, I think that early on, I was also looking for something. I'm kind of a serial. I'm always looking for something new or a new and more efficient way to do my work. Um, I was at a design consultancy at the time, and SolidWorks was the software that we used for sure. Um, so Onshape, I recognize some of the things that Chris talked about, the way that the, the history and the versions are captured, the fact that the software was so stable in terms of eliminating crashes basically, and which, as every SolidWorks user knows, is a regular part of how you conduct your work during the day. You prepare for data loss by making sure you save regularly and all of that stuff. Um, so for me, at the beginning, I started to use Onshape as on the side and evaluate how it worked, and really, because you and Chris is in a similar situation. I think you have a, a bunch of users of a software platform, and they're all professionals, and they all are, have developed skill to do their job well from day to day. And so introducing a new way to work is can be a real challenge. um, so the way that I was dealt with that was essentially learn how to use Onshape on the side, develop um, enough capability that you can demonstrate the value right to your colleagues and to your peers. And that's essentially how that happened at the beginning. And at some point, um, there was a decision made that all new projects are going to start in Onshape and move forward in Onshape. We kept legacy systems around for continuity. Not every project needed to start from scratch in Onshape. Um, and now that's continuing to grow. We were acquired by Jabil Packaging Solutions a couple years ago now, and there is really quite nice organic growth of the Onshape solution through my team as well as some other teams in the company. And that's essentially how I think that's the way it works really well, because then there's a pull from users who
Right.
develop skill and demonstrate value to the management chain.
And maybe going back a little bit, I think that brings us well sort of off of, initial evaluation and sort of initial introduction into that idea of, okay, well, we decided this is now a good tool that we want to shift toward. Well, how do we actually go about executing on that? It sounds like for you, Romeo, it was new projects in Onshape while maintaining legacy systems until some sort of critical mass was reached. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's true. And just to be clear, like many larger organizations, there are several CAD solutions that are in use, and Onshape really needs to, and the engineering and design staff really need to be able to have these systems that work kind of together. Um, Most people also will be familiar with, sharing information with vendors or with customers. Sometimes it can work within your CAD system, but there's a lot of neutral file format kind of sharing of information, and Onshape is a piece of that ecosystem. It has incredible promise in terms of being able to share CAD data directly with customers and with vendors, and that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting. It's definitely, one of the things we hear is how do we, phase out of that old system. And so that multi-CAD environment for a portion of time, sounds like you sort of made it work and moved your team more toward Onshape in the long run.
Hmm.
Another thing that we hear a lot in terms of that transition is around learning curve, and around switching the sort of skill set that's been acquired in existing solutions over to Onshape. Brandon, I believe that you had some interesting experience here, with all these folks that sort of decided on Onshape, you having more experience than others. What would the learning curve look like for yourself and your colleagues as you made that transition?
So far, everyone's enjoyed the learning curve. I was talking to an engineer this morning and said, "Man, good call on the Onshape. I've been tinkering with it, and it's pretty slick." I mean, most of us have, whether through school or jobs, backgrounds in other 3D modeling. But yeah, but making the switch, I haven't heard anyone complaining. For me, I only did 3D modeling back in college, and I hated the course because it was many midnights in the lab. It was like learning 4 different languages at once. But the Onshape, I started on my own and just enjoyed the process, and then doing it at work. Everyone who's got a modeling background has been able to transition pretty easily. A lot of the stuff. So you just got to learn the new buttons, but it's all the same stuff.
And everyone learns a bit differently. I'm curious, did you leverage training material in the learning center? Did you kind of learn on your own, or how'd you and the team go about that?
Yeah, so me personally started with just YouTube videos, and then I saw the training center and then worked my way through that. And so when we brought it to Duraline, that's what I told everyone. Hey, they've got a great training. You just work your way through those, and it explains all the tools, and everyone's off and running.
Awesome. Chris or Romeo, anything you'd add on sort of learning curve that in your experience?
I do have an interesting anecdote. We have one of the members of my team that's actually actively using Onshape is a little more advanced in his career. So he's got 20 years of experience and has never done any CAD work. He kind of missed CAD in school. It was kind of in that late 90s kind of transition period where CAD wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. And so he never kind of caught the CAD bug. And he always had a dedicated CAD department at his previous companies. So he just never got a chance to use it. Now at Hasbro, he's been wanting to learn to do the CAD work and just couldn't get the hang of SolidWorks, couldn't get the hang of any of the other tools that we've been using. But he was the first one to volunteer to jump onto our trial, and he loves it. He picked it up really quickly. He did boot camp, and he's been doing great. So really great personal example of just how intuitive and pretty easy it is for even non-CAD users to pick up.
Glad to hear. Go ahead, Romeo. Sorry.
Yeah, the support that Onshape offers is really unparalleled, and that's been a big part of learning and developing capability and developing skill with this software is confidence that if you have an issue, you contact support and literally within minutes you have an acknowledgement and a response, and it's amazing. You can see an Onshape engineer in your document working on the problem that you just described. I can't count the number of times I just let an issue go rather than do a pack and go and share all of the information with the value added reseller. That's one thing that has been truly remarkable in learning. Onshape also provides really a lot of live technical support and training. So in addition to the learning center stuff that Brandon talked about, they're very super responsive. And then the other thing I'd like to call out is that the forums are another incredible place for asking questions or seeing other people's questions, and the community's engagement with those questions and the depth and thoughtfulness of responses and solutions. It's amazing. So it's really a great way to see how other people do certain kinds of work and get some insight into how you might want to address that kind of issue down the road.
So interesting. So multiple different resources potentially, and I imagine as you're convincing a team to make a switch to a new system, having the sort of reassurance that the support mechanism, the training materials, the community is going to be there to help, I imagine makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, it really is, and I think it has a lot to do with kind of when Onshape is growing up. There's so much. That kind of content is easy to deliver, and so when you develop that stuff well and make it available, it's kind of, maybe it's a bit of a unique time to be learning through those methods, as opposed to 20 years ago, right? Very different.
Yeah, much more just available on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Another browser tab over from Onshape, right? Interesting. And it looks like we actually might have our first question in the chat here, and this is kind of maybe open to all three of you. Is where did pushback come from, and how did you handle it within the organization as you're making these switch? I imagine they're asking about internal pushback as you were trying to convince folks to adopt or change to a new system.
I'll go first. There's a couple of places where, I mean, any company has kind of legacy data that they have to maintain and figure out how to continue to take advantage of, right? And that's there's just sort of a momentum that if you already have been in business for a long time, you have a lot of things that you may need to deal with in the future. You may need to support in the future. So there's sort of that kind of momentum. And I kind of hinted at it before. Um, it is a non-trivial thing to learn a new way of working, especially for people who are at, they've, like I said, they're professionals, and they use a certain kind of a tool to be effective all day long, and that can be there's to get through that, or to work with those people and get through that. There's kind of often an aha kind of a moment where they realize that it didn't crash today, or that you were able to share the data with them right away, or there's a feature that works in a way that they didn't expect, that is unique to Onshape. Those kinds of things, I think, are the most fundamental, because if the users really like the product and do a good job with it, then it's reasonably easy to move it through to others.
So sort of twofold there, data being one, and then convincing users to learn a new tool. But again, if the tool makes their life easier and you can sort of show that, it makes that a lot easier.
Yeah.
I think that actually transitions us nicely into sort of moving forward in the journey into the continued adoption and the sort of value that is being, proven out and shown within your organization. I think all three of you, I think you alluded to this, Romeo, sort of the viral nature of Onshape, and the idea that as you start to see some of these aspects, you really can't unsee it and sort of go back to your old way of working. So Chris, I think you actually had some interesting anecdotes here where different departments within Hasbro kind of see different things for themselves. Do you want to just expand on that?
Yeah, sure. So I was initially excited about that Git functionality, but what surprised me most about this was, as I was kind of showing some of my other colleagues and different places in the company, everybody kind of saw a different feature of the software and was like, "Oh, that's really great. That's going to help me a lot." The sculpting team really loved the mesh integration, right? Bringing in mesh files and STLs and OBJs. So that was the sculpting team. The model shop really enjoyed, that revision history. Like I was excited about. Our VP of sourcing was really excited about the permissions aspect, and so was the Star Wars team. That's an interesting anecdote from working at Hasbro. You definitely don't want to be the company that leaks the new Star Wars character 2 years before it's on screen. So that's security was a big deal for that team. So everybody I talked to kind of said, "Oh, that's really interesting," or "Oh, that's really interesting," and was very excited about different aspects. And it was kind of, I kind of describe it, it's almost like a death by a thousand cuts. So there's not one big aha moment for the entire company that's why we're going to switch to Onshape, but everybody I talk to sees a different feature and is really excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes it really hard to know. You have to know the team that you're talking to and kind of anticipate what they're going to be excited about, because it's such a vast program and it does have so many unique features that you have to make sure you highlight the right one when you're talking to the specific people in the company.
Interesting. Yeah. What are they going to care about most as
Exactly.
you show them a new CAD system or a new product development environment? Any sort of similar, viral type anecdotes from Brandon or Romeo? I know we have a couple other things sort of on this general topic. Anything you'd add to what Chris said?
No, all our guys, we just got excited that we could now sit down and model, jigs or anything we needed. We could bring, the employees from the floor and say, "Hey, is this what you're thinking? Is this what you're trying to describe?" And let them, look at it, twirl it around. Yeah, and then sending off to the machine shops. A lot of machine shops we work with are, you walk in there, it's just clutter everywhere. It's the old school guys working, and then you say, "Hey, let me send you this link, and you can twirl this part around to see what you're going to make," and they've all got a kick out of that.
Interesting, because I feel like a lot of folks we talk to are worried that machine shops are not going to be happy about receiving a link and sort of, want to work in maybe the way that they have been, but that hasn't been your experience.
No, in fact, I've shown a few of them that are local. I go in and say, here's the link, and you can even click on things to measure in case I forget something on my 2D drawing that I'm sending you. But they've all got a kick out of it.
Awesome. Maybe avoid a little back and forth when they can actually just self-serve on the 3D model there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I feel like we find that particularly at larger organizations, the accessibility aspect is something that provides a lot of benefit to up and down the management chain, being able to see and access models and leverage our light users as well. And for folks in the audience who are unfamiliar, Onshape Enterprise allows non-CAD folks to have what we call light licenses that allows them to view, to review analytics, to even approve releases without needing a full modeling license or any sort of hardware setup. I believe all three of you are leveraging light licenses at your organization. Maybe Romeo, how is Jabil taking advantage of light licenses? What type of effect does that have on the business?
Well, it really reduces email communications and file attachments and those kinds of things. One area where we use light seats quite a bit is with project management people. So these are people who may not they may not be doing CAD work or, directly, but they're intimately involved with all aspects of the project and the development of individual components. So together with the release management part, which is gives us confidence that we're sharing the correct revision of a part. Project managers, so essentially the little workflow goes, we finish up a little design sprint, we release some parts, and the project management and tooling engineering and whatever other department that we need that needs to know about that release gets included in the release as observers. They receive an email with some information about what the release is about, and then they can go and deal with an export, because we still need to export neutral files and export PDF to squirrel away those documents where they belong and share them with the appropriate vendors. So we use them for project management and other internal departments where that might not be directly hands-on CAD users or designers. We also use light users for vendors. And customers both. So both of those, and slightly different reasons, of course. But if we're working with a vendor on a piece of custom automation or something like that, we'll share the data that way, and they can look at it or export as needed. And same with customers.
Wow, so wide variety, both internal and external. Then to just avoid attaching files to emails and instead get them directly into the CAD environment.
Yeah, and we're using the publications are a new kind of a document that was introduced last year that is a really interesting way to share collections of information with both vendors and customers from different documents.
Yeah, publications were highly asked for and a really nice way to package up that information. I actually see a question in the chat here around non-CAD users being more involved in the design process and manufacturing process. And from what you're saying, Romeo, it seems like Onshape enables that in a bunch of different ways. Chris or Brandon, anything you'd add? We actually have a few more questions here as well we can get to, but want to give you a chance to chime in there.
Yeah, I've actually had reviews where we're making something for like a best practice that we're going to share, and we can huddle up with the whole like the front office team, and I can just pull up Onshape, and pictures worth 1,000 words, where a 3D model is worth 1,000 pictures. So we can twirl it around, and I'm the one that kind of does the design work. But I mean, other people who have no CAD background can have great suggestions, and it's cool to go back and and modify and tweak things.
Yeah, we like to say it's democratizing the process, not locking people out from this design world. It's getting people in there as much as possible. So I want to make sure we get to some of these questions here. So I'm seeing one that is asking, in enterprises, avoiding mistakes like working on the wrong version become much more costly. Does Onshape help with that?
Sorry,
Yes.
yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
Don't all speak at
Sorry.
once.
I was gonna jump in on the last question and mention that it's really great that because of the way Onshape is structured, I can send out a model to my packaging engineer and my QA engineer. They don't need to manipulate the model or work with the model, but they consistently see the most up-to-date model, and that is enormous, right? If I were to email them, if a project is going on for 5 or 6 months and I email them a pack and go from SolidWorks in the first 2 months, who knows where the project is going to be 6 months later, but they're still making decisions based off of this old CAD model, and I just haven't sent it to them, and it's been kind of out of sight, out of mind. Onshape completely eliminates that, right? Like I send them the link once, and whenever they need to refer to it, it's always the up-to-date model.
So that's a little bit of sort of both the last two questions, and it's a bit of the right version, making sure everyone sees that as well as involving everybody. Interesting. Yeah, they're flying in. Let me see if I can prioritize here. So Chris, this one's directed at you. So Chris mentioned Git. I wonder if you and your colleagues have managed to integrate that into the team's workflow. Is it improving collaboration, or is it more like a feature to use in solo projects, branching off to test individual features?
So I'm excited to expand this, but at the moment we're still in our testing phase. We still only have a very small number of seats. So the collaboration aspect hasn't been too significant yet. I expect it will be in the future, but yeah, it's replacing the former workflow of course, was just every 30 minutes you do a pack and go just to save your SolidWorks files and make sure everything's all set. And my computer is completely littered with dozens of pack and goes from all the projects that I've been working on since I started. And that's not efficient. That's not great. And I'm never going to refer to them again. That's just in case my computer crashes and I lose all this data. So we've kind of built up and kind of worked around the flaws of our previous tools, and Onshape just completely nullifies all of that. And I've been very successful personally in making those checkpoints and those save states within Onshape. And yeah, I'm not going back.
Yeah, I mean, keeping all the data in one place, right, and just the version history tree, the easy referability between versions. Yeah.
We use branching for evaluating new ideas or concepts. We generally try and limit the number of branches or how much time we spend in branches. That's the way we try and make sure that all of our releases are done in the main branch. We do side explorations, temporary development stuff, and then once we're happy, we merge those into main, or they get abandoned and kept for us to look at later, but they don't end up in the main design.
Out of curiosity, how long is that sort of max time that you're in a branch before you either merge or clip it?
Well, it really varies. The main thing is trying to remember to do releases from the main. So if whatever you're working on needs to be released, it's either going to go into production, or you're going to share it outside, or you're going to share it with somebody else. We generally try and do releases at that point. At that stage, we need to either decide this really belongs in main and work back in there, or if it's truly a separate concept or idea, we really have to start to think about how do we maintain these two separate concepts.
Right.
The other way we use branching, I think, is a typical one, is 2 or 3 people can explore on the same kind of topic at the same point in history, but on their own branch, and then we can evaluate the best approach.
I think that ties in really nicely to a question we just received around creating best practices as you're adopting Onshape. So the question says, do you find it necessary to create best practice methods to help users work together? For example, since any user can open any document, I would argue there's sharing permission type things in there as well, but it's easy for someone to make inadvertent changes. Do you have training to tell users how to avoid that? Sounds like you might use branches in that situation.
Well, for us, we are still working on how to develop those best practices. One thing that's fantastic about Onshape is the micro versions and the versions piece, and the analytics piece means that even if somebody comes in and does some stuff in a document that we need to roll back from or recover from, no problem. You can roll back to or make a version. So you can both save the work that they did, right? Because as Brandon mentioned, there's often great insight that comes from places that might not be central to the project. So you want to keep what they did, but also retain your earlier kind of last good known state. You can do both with the micro versions and versions.
So a little bit of guardrails in place, but also diversion and just the way it works fundamentally makes it that you're never really going to mess anything up too bad if someone goes in there and makes some G's.
It's virtually impossible to not be able to recover. We haven't encountered it yet.
So I want to be conscious of time. I want to give you guys, anyone else have any thoughts on sort of that matter as you're adopting, mixing in best practices?
The boot camp also does a good job when it explains how to do something. It kind of says, by the way, here's a best practice. Like if you're extruding something, extrude symmetrical, so your model or the origin's in the center. So it gives a lot of basic best practices as you're going through those learning.
That's a good point.
And for those who don't know, boot camp is our live training session that every new user goes through to sort of switch your knowledge from other CAD systems into Onshape. All right, we're going to get to one final question, and I want to give you guys a chance to talk about the future a little bit. But one question here is around the internet. Has lack of connectivity been an issue or roadblock to acceptance of Onshape, or been an issue in its use in your experience?
I'll tackle my experience. That was one of our criteria. Offline support. Of course, if we don't have internet, we can't use Onshape. So that scored a 0, but Onshape still won in the end. The flip side of that is there's no hardware or software or computers we had to beef up. Everyone on their laptop could just start using Onshape right away. And really, if the internet goes down at the plant, shipping can't do their stuff. There's a lot of people that are kind of, handicapped. So, and in the workaround, you just, you get your phone and fire up your hotspot, and you can still get in and do things. So it hasn't been a big issue for us at all.
I would say I'm in a similar position. And even my legacy SolidWorks, we have a license manager that's network based. So even if I don't have internet access, I can't use SolidWorks either on my overpriced machine.
Or if you forget to check out a license, right? If you're going to be away from your office for a while, that's another one. Yeah,
nothing like that with Onshape.
We have a concern about that as well. Although in practical terms, internet access is generally very good. There's trying to work on an airplane is a little bit difficult, but generally it's really a non-issue. And your the uptime and the low instance of losing work for other reasons, like the general stability of the thing, overall for me far outweighs that the few minutes a day when I don't have internet.
It goes back a little bit to what Dave was saying in his keynote, right? 99.9% uptime and zero downtime to the installs or crashes or anything along those lines. Cool. So got about 7 minutes left here. I do want to give each of you an opportunity to briefly talk about where you see the future of Onshape at your business before we wrap up this session here. So Brandon, maybe I'll start with you briefly. What do you see as kind of the next frontier of Onshape for Duraline?
So I've asked this to our, to the team, and really right now, each kind of engineer at their own site is kind of doing their own little things. And we really see moving forward is more collaborating with our suppliers or our equipment providers. So when, hey, we need a new line to install, we start getting equipment rather than just here's what the vendor can supply. We can really start collaborating with them, making changes, suggesting things. That's kind of where we see a good use for Onshape moving forward.
Love that. I think you mentioned earlier kind of taking control back of that process.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Romeo, how about yourself? What do you see as the next frontier at Jabil packaging for Onshape?
I would like to see more team members start to use it and continue the kind of organic growth. I think that I would really like to dig into feature script, custom feature script. I know we didn't touch on it today, but it's one of the other big differentiators for Onshape and developing, particularly companies that have. I mean, most people have kind of repeating or repetitive workflows that are take a bit of time to do. You have to remember to do all the steps, but they're also kind of intrinsically part of your value as a company. And so those are perfect kinds of things to build into a custom feature script. Allow people to work more quickly and more consistently over time.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Romeo. It's a shame we didn't necessarily get more time on that in this session, but a lot of large companies are seeing that as really their competitive advantage within Onshape is using our ability to create your own custom features to automate workflows, to, as Romeo said, automate repetitive tasks. We see extensive use of that, both in the public library, there's a lot, but you can also write your own internally. All right.
And
Chris,
just one quick shout out. There is a ton of great features developed by the community, right? The users out there of Onshape. So, have to say thanks to everybody who develops high quality feature scripts, and the forum is the best place to find them.
It's amazing the type of work people put out in the public space. Really, really cool. Chris, again, last but not least, what do you see as sort of the next frontier of Onshape at Hasbro?
As a matter of fact, just yesterday I had a meeting with the sculpting team. So we're finally branching away from engineers. We're going into our sculpting team. They do a lot of 3D mesh files, and they were looking, and we've always been looking for the silver bullet of how you bring, an action figure that's been modeled in ZBrush into a CAD software. And for the entire 10 years I've been working at Hasbro, that's been probably one of our biggest pain points in development. So when we learned about how Onshape kind of almost natively brings in mesh files and allows you to manipulate them in the tool without really converting the files, that really caught their attention. So we're really excited. They got a full demo yesterday, and they're like, yeah, we need 9, all our entire team's going to go into boot camp. So that's the next push, is to get us out of just into the engineering world and push us out into bigger and better places within the company.
Awesome. Super exciting. I do feel it's a slight need just to clarify, it's not a mesh editing tool, but there's a lot of really interesting things with the mixed modeling to be able to work with both CAD and mesh models, as Chris was alluding to.
Right.
Great. Well, everyone, thank you so much. Romeo, Chris, Brandon, you guys are awesome. Really appreciate you taking the time today and over the last month or so to prepare for this and share your stories with the Onshape community. I really think everyone in the audience probably got something that resonates with them and empowers them to take the next step. So again, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Sure.
Before we wrap up, I do want to give one quick reminder here. Upcoming in-person event in Boston in May is LiveWorks 2023. Chance to meet other Onshape customers as well as the folks who actually design and build Onshape here in Boston. It's going to be a great event, 4 days, tons of technologists, breakout sessions, industry experts, as well as 15 in-depth Onshape specific breakout sessions and 27 live Onshape training opportunities. Special opportunity for the folks attending here today live. If you use promo code Onshape Live, you get a free all access pass. If you're one of the first 100 registrants, I imagine those are going to go quickly. So definitely get in there, sign up. There's a buzz around PTC, and I think honestly the larger Boston area for LiveWorks coming up. So I'm really excited, and I hope I get to see many of you in person in Boston in May. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Onshape Live today.